Hi, welcome back to my channel. I have been sick the last week, so this mid-year wrap-up is getting up a little bit later than I would have liked, but I have everything organized and I'm ready to go through and kind of wrap up my first 6 months of reading. I'm really excited to do this since I feel like I've had a really good first half of the year of reading and the questions sound really fun, and so I'm going to start off and give some stats about my reading so far and then go through and read the questions for the mid-year tag. So far from January through the end of June, I read 48 books, which is really good. At the beginning of the year, I think I set my goal for 50 books because I just didn't know how my reading was going to go this year with having a toddler. So I have actually done way better than I thought I would do. So I'm hoping, if I'm tracking already at 48 books, I'm hoping I can maybe hit 100 by the end of the year, which I've never done before. So we'll see kind of how the rest of this year goes. But so far I'm at a good pace. I've read 16,694 pages, and most of these stats are off Storygraph. Since Storygraph gives you those stats, I haven't really tracked these on my own. So they're going to be based off of Storygraph stats. The fiction versus nonfiction split, 85% of my books have been fiction, 15% have been nonfiction. My top 5 genres have been fantasy with 15, literary with 12, romance with 9, LGBTQIA+, and sci-fi tied for 5th at 7. So kind of surprising because usually literary is my number 1, but also not surprising because I really have been trying to read more fantasy, and that's been what a lot of the book recommendations that I've been kind of following have been recommending. So this is probably the most fantasy I've ever read, and I've been really enjoying it. Of course, I always love my literary fiction. That's kind of where I've always kind of trended. And then if we go into the breakdown of print, digital, and audiobooks, 80% has been print, so that's either books that I own or books that I borrowed from the library. Then digital at 15%, and those are going to be ebooks from the library or they're going to be digital ARCs that I received. And then there's like a 0.5% of going towards audiobooks, with only 2 books this year that I've listened to. I'm not a huge audiobook person. I don't really get into fiction audiobooks. It's really hard for me to pay attention, and so I tend to do like biographies or nonfiction in audiobooks because then I feel like I'm listening to a podcast. Then my star rating split, I've had 10 5-stars, 16 4-stars, 23 stars, 2 2-stars, and 0 1-stars. I don't know if I've ever given a book a 1-star because for me, if I finished it, even if I didn't like it, it's probably getting a 2-star. A 1-star, I guess, would be a DNF for me. But then if I DNF books, I don't rate them. And then my average star rating is 3.7, which I think is pretty good. I've had quite a few 5-stars with 10, and 16 4-stars. So my reading has been generally pretty good. Half of the books that I read nearly have been 4 or 5 stars. So that's really, really good. And then I'm going to kind of just do like a monthly spread real quick. In January, I read 6 books. February, I read 8. March, 8. April, 9. May, 11th. And then June, 6th. So kind of like peaked, and then I've kind of gone down a little bit, which makes sense because the summer has kind of taken me away with trips. And then obviously I been busy with this cold and other things going on, so I haven't had as much time for reading as I usually do. Okay, so let's get into the questions. I have them written down here. How is your reading going so far? So far, my reading has been really good. As you can see from my stats, I've had really good ratings. I've been reading quite a bit. I have found time in the mornings and at nights to be able to read around the time that I watch my toddler. And I feel like I have been able to read a lot more than I expected at the beginning of the year, because last year I was in the newborn first year haze of having my first kid, and it's so hard to get a routine and it's so hard to find that time for yourself nonetheless to do something. And I feel like this year I've kind of hit that stride and kind of found that time for myself again, which I've really enjoyed. Best book, so that's so hard. I'm gonna just throw up a couple that I really enjoyed this year. I really enjoyed Braiding Sweetgrass. This one I will always think about. It's a book that really resonated with me in a lot of different ways, and I think it does with most people that read this book. So definitely Braiding Sweetgrass. Light Pirate, I really enjoyed Light Pirate. I didn't think I would enjoy it as much as I did, and I feel like this one isn't talked about a lot, and it's really good. So if you haven't checked this one out, I highly suggest you do. And another book that I really enjoyed was The Storm We Made, and this is a debut. I was really excited to read this one just based off the summary, and it did not let me down. I really enjoyed it. It really shows you how all these little decisions that you make in your life really affect not only yourself, but the trajectory of your family and the people that are in your life. And it is historical fiction. It is really heartbreaking in some parts, but so worth it. And I really enjoyed this one. So that's just a few of my favorites. I don't want to go through like all my 5 stars because that would take a while, but those were a few of my favorites. So then the next question is best sequel. I didn't read a ton of sequels, but I did. I'm gonna kind of just pull out the Pines um, Wayward Pines. Is it Wayward Pines? Yeah, Wayward Pines series. Pines being the first one, and then the second, and then the third. I blew through these. I really enjoyed them. They're by Blake Crouch. I've read most of his other main popular works, and this was next up for me from him. And these were just really fun, really fast paced. Definitely, if you like his other books, check out this series because they were just so fun and um, so unique as well. I also really enjoyed Parable of the Talents, which was the sequel to Parable of the Sower. So this one was also really good. And then the next question is favorite reread. I didn't do any rereads. I don't often reread a lot because I have so many books on my TBR that I don't want to waste any time rereading books. I just want to keep getting on to the next. Not to say that I don't aspire to reread. I would love to be a rereader, but I'm just not one to kind of prioritize that. So I didn't have any rereads this year. Genre I'm loving the most, I will say fantasy. I think fantasy hasn't gotten my biggest ratings this year, or my highest ratings this year, but it's been a genre that I've read such a wide variety within and really seen different parts and different things in fantasy that I enjoy. Pushed me and made me want to keep reading fantasy, so I think that's a good thing. New release I'm looking forward to. I'm gonna say The Book of Elsewhere, which is that Keanu Reeves collaboration with China Miéville. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I'm really looking forward to that book. I think it comes out July 24th, maybe. I know it comes out the end of July, so I'm really excited to read that book. I really am a big fan of Keanu Reeves, and I will support anything he does. So really excited for that one. Biggest anticipated release for the rest of this year, I'm gonna say Sally Rooney's Intermezzo. I am not the biggest Sally Rooney fan, but I do like to see what she does. I've read Normal People and Conversations with Friends. I enjoyed Normal People. Conversations with Friends was all right. And then I tried reading Beautiful World, but I couldn't get into it at the time. But I think if I go back, I could probably get into it. So I probably should read that one. But I am really excited to see where she goes next. She's one of those really fun hype authors that is doing different things, and so I'm excited to read her new release later this year. Biggest disappointment, I'm going to say Emily Henry's A Funny Story, just because I loved Happy Place last year and gave it a 5 stars, and Funny Story really fell flat for me. So I'm going to say Funny Story, although I didn't give it a horrible rating. The 1 2-star of my year so far was Magnolia Parks, but to be honest, I wasn't going into Magnolia Parks thinking I was going to love it. I already had kind of my hesitations about it, so I don't know if that was a huge disappointment for me. Maybe Monstrilio. I was really looking forward to Monstrilio, and I really thought I was going to really, really like this book. And I felt like throughout it, I was just kind of trying to get through it, and it didn't connect with me. And the grief wasn't something that really resonated with me, that I was really hoping to feel all of the grief and emotion. And I just didn't connect with this one like I thought I was going to. So this one was a disappointment for me, especially since that was on a lot of people's end of the year favorites from last year. I really thought it was going to be like a new favorite of mine, just wasn't. Then the next one is Biggest Surprise. I'm going to go with Lie With Me. This little novella really blew me away. It was a book that I just walked into Barnes and Nobles and picked it up, and I didn't have any idea about it. It is very Call Me By Your Name-esque, and it is heartbreaking and sweet. And the way that this is written, it's such beautiful prose, and it's really interesting because it is a translated work, and a lot of times that does not translate, but it definitely did in this book. I highly recommend it. It's such a short book too that it really packs a punch for how long it is, so, or how short it is. Then I have Fave New Author. I'm gonna go with Amy Jo Burns because I read 2 of her books this year. So I started out the year, I think I read this in January or February, Mercury, and I really, really enjoyed this. This was the first book I read by her. Really liked the characters, really liked how the story unfolded. So I ended up picking up her other book, Shiner, and equally loved this one. I think Amy Jo Burns is such a great writer. She can write so simply, but it is so beautiful and carries so much weight. And I really, really love reading her books. I'm looking forward to reading more of hers. I think next up on my list for her is Cinderland, which I think may be a memoir. So really excited to read that one next. Newest fave character, Six of Crows. I really enjoyed this ensemble of characters. I think they were all very fleshed out and distinct and had their own strengths and weaknesses, and I really enjoyed this book. So I'm going to say the Six of Crows team here. Books that made you cry. Most of the time, books that make me cry are going to be nonfictions, and they're going to be memoirs. Memoirs hit me like no other, I guess, because I know that they're true and they're really happening. So I'm going to say one of them that really sticks out to me, I read in the beginning of this year, and it was an arc, and it was called This Ordinary Stardust. And I think the book just came out, so I need to go actually buy myself a copy because I loved it that much. And it is about a scientist who, his wife is also a scientist, and they have a young daughter, and his wife and his daughter come down with very rare and different forms of brain cancer. And it's the way that he uses science to kind of deal with the grief, and also how science can explain things and how the lack of science can explain things, and the just intersection of emotion and science and how he wades through all of that that's going on. It really broke my heart at the end. I ugly cried, and I can't wait to pick up my own copy so I can kind of go back and read parts of it that really hit home. So I would definitely say This Ordinary Stardust, and highly, highly recommend it. Books that made you happy. I'm going to say The Rachel Incident was such a surprise to me. I originally just borrowed it from the library and then ended up picking up my own copy afterwards because I loved it so much. The banter between this friendship and the twists and turns this takes, there's so many serious, hard things that happen in this book, and it's a very coming of age book, but there's this lightness and this comedic undertone that helps this character get through it. And there was so many lines and things in here that just made me laugh out loud, and that does not happen often. And so this was such a sweet book of both hard things and hope. it was a good balance of the two. So I really, really enjoyed this book, and I was giggling at different parts. So I would say The Rachel Incident. And then the next one is Most Beautiful Book You've Bought This Year. So, I'm trying to think of like the books that I bought versus that I've already owned. Um, I would say maybe The Familiar is really, I think it's a really pretty cover. Maybe The Familiar. Maybe a surprise one would be There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension. This is a nonfiction book that I read this year and picked up, and I don't know, it's just such a really cool cover. I think it's pretty in its own way. I don't really I don't tend to love like super flowery pretty books. I tend to love books that kind of like stand out in a different way. So this is definitely more up my alley than say like, a pretty flowery book that I may have. So probably those two books. And then the last question is books that you really need to read by the end of the year. And I actually made a video on this a couple videos ago, so you can go check that out. But I think the ones that kind of stick out on the top of my head is The Will of the Many. That book is, I think, going to be one of the biggest books on everybody's end of the year wrap ups for their favorite. And because that book is the first in the series and is the only one that's been released, I really want to catch up so that I can join the hype when the second book comes out. And then I think Red Rising is the other book that really stands out in my head. I know people really love that series, and I really like the idea of it, and I just need to kind of dive back into it. I tried reading it beginning of this year, and I think I got through like 40 pages, and it just wasn't, it wasn't hitting with me, and I just soft DNF'd it. So I think I really need to go back and dive into it deeper. And a lot of people say that it may be a little slow in the beginning, but as you get further, it really pays off, and it's really, really good. So I would say those two books really stand out as books that I have to read by end of this year. And then I think that's it. I think those are all the questions. Thank you so much for being here. I am really excited to have done my first mid-year tag on YouTube. This is really exciting, and I can't wait to see you on my next video. Thanks. Bye.